Hey everybody, John Stevenson here from the i5 Crash Course series. In the first season of the i5 Crash Course series, we went over the different Space Force career fields. Now in this episode, we're going to be diving deep into the cyber career field and what cyberspace operations look like in the Space Force. The space domain and the cyberspace domain are two completely distinct areas of operation that are recognized by the US military and NATO. The DoD and NATO have actually declared cyber as its own domain, coexisting with air, land, sea, and space. I mean, this kind of makes sense, right? The space domain may be physical, but the cyberspace domain is definitely non-physical, yet it still operates in an environment or domain, the information domain. But John, come on, most of what the Space Force does is with computers, so why is there a separate cyberspace domain? First off, every single military branch uses a crap ton of computers. And in all honesty, every single service branch uses the cyber domain, and that's why this Crash Course season gets its own episode on cyber. Space and cyber are different things, but as you'll quickly learn, everything you do in the space domain can't be done without the cyber domain, and some people believe that space operations is simultaneously cyber operations. Also, just a quick plug real quick, if you're interested in what may potentially become its own domain in the future, check out our AI Crash Course series. It's really cool, put together by our AI team on the i5 Space Development Division. They're doing a fantastic job. They're still producing them. I'm also pretty sure the voice in it is AI too, so that's pretty cool. I mean, shoot, most of the stuff I got for the script is from Microsoft Copilot, if I'm going to be honest with you. That's definitely where I did most of my research, because it literally gives you sources of the things you're asking about. But this is a cyber video, not an AI video. Just like how space and cyber can be seen as different, cyber and AI are actually two different things too. That's why we have two separate teams on i5 development, a cyber team and an AI team. I digress. You know, it's actually crazy to think that I made the first season without ChatGPT. Would have been a lot easier if I had that. Everything space relies on cyber. All of our space systems are on some sort of network, and with that comes the potential to be attacked. On page 35 of the Space Force Doctrine updated as of July 2023, space operations are simultaneously cyber operations. Many of the Space Force's cyber operations ensure that our space operation capabilities on the defensive and offensive levels remain configured, maintained, and secured throughout the duration of their life cycle, maintaining the system integrity. There is insane interconnectedness between the cyber and space domain in modern warfare, as space operations heavily rely on advanced computers and software, including military satellites, missile guidance, and ground combat systems. All of these systems must be defended 24/7, 365, and 360 degrees, which is where cyber comes into play. As much as we conduct space operations and cyber operations to take out the bad guys, we spend just as much, if not more time, looking at our own systems and looking for vulnerabilities in our capabilities to ensure that we can fix them so our adversaries have a less likely chance to hack and attack our systems. This 24/7 round-the-clock thing is never going to end, because there's always going to be vulnerabilities in the cybersecurity realm, which means there's always going to be tons of repairing and installing our cyber systems. Literally, without cyber, we wouldn't have space, and without space, we wouldn't have F-35s in the sky, and without our air power in the sky, our land and sea would get taken over by other people's air, which is controlled by space, which is arguably controlled by cyber. Dang. We gotta stop making fun of all those nerds that spent their entire lives on their computers. Maybe we should just give them castles with showers on every floor. Nice showers. The U.S. Space Force's cyber operations play a crucial role in ensuring we are secure and effective. Guardians are learning cyber skills for defensive and offensive purposes, more recently seen with the Moonlight Defender training exercise that happened in the fall of 2023, with its primary objective being to enhance the U.S. Space Force's defensive cyber operations capabilities. The Space Force has plenty of cyber operations teams across the country, with the 4th Test and Evaluation Squadron being recognized as the Cyber Operations Team of the Year for 2023. They're responsible for coordinating and executing cyber operational risk and penetration assessments, which directly contribute to the cyber resiliency of many of our weapon systems, such as electronic warfare, tactical satellite communications, and GPS weapon systems, which all ultimately support our national security. Space Delta 6 is known as the Cyber Delta, comprised of 5 squadrons across the United States, including the 645th Cyberspace Squadron in Patrick Space Force Base in Florida, which primarily focuses on providing defensive cyber operations across the East, and the 65th Cyberspace Squadron in Vandenberg, California, which is our primary location in the West that assures our space command and control, as well as continually develops innovative technologies to ensure this command and control. Okay, well, let's say you're not somebody in the military and you don't really see how all this stuff applies directly to you. Well, before you decide to close this video, there are 2 things that run the world. It's data and money. You know, I think I only have like $2 in my wallet, and one of them has a mustache on it. But point is, basically everything is now digital, especially our money, and almost 100% our data, unless you have a crazy hard drive locked in your basement. What I'm trying to say is there's not a day without space, and there's not a second without cyber. As previously stated, there are 2 sides to the cyber operations coin: defensive and offensive. The defensive side is divided into 3 layers: the physical network layer, logical network layer, and cyber persona layer. The physical network layer includes all IT devices and infrastructure that store, transport, and process info in cyberspace. These things need to be physically secure to prevent damage and unauthorized access. Next is the logical layer. This is the programming that drives the network, like a website hosted on servers in multiple physical locations accessed through a single URL. And lastly, we have the cyber persona layer, which is created by abstracting data from the logical network layer to develop digital representations of an actor or entity in cyberspace. These link to multiple physical and logical network layers. Essentially, these 3 layers are interdependent, but they have their own unique attributes that are necessary in maintaining our cyber operations. And all of these layers are literally seen in what the US Space Force does. Cyber is literally the life support of our military service. So why is it so fragmented? Currently, you have Army cyber warfare officers obviously focused on Army operations in cyberspace, just like how Space Force cyber officers focus on space systems cybersecurity. But of course, the Army also conducts tons of space operations, and for a while had more space assets than any other branch. Honestly, it kind of feels like over time there's been a huge tug-of-war on who is really in charge of all our space and cyber stuff. I mean, we all got air stuff, and it seems to be going okay, even with a whole separate Air Force, but does this make as much sense for space? I mean, does it even make sense for aircraft to be owned by anyone but the Air Force? I mean, I guess different branches use aircraft for specific purposes, and they have specialized aircraft that only they use. Okay, that's a whole separate video. We do know that the DoD is aiming to move a lot of space operations under the US Space Force, with the more recent example being Army's Joint Tactical Ground Station Missile Warning System being transferred to the US Space Force in October of 2023, following the transfer of the Army Satellite Communications in August of 2022, which marked the first time all military SATCOM capabilities were under one service. So, backtracking a little bit, if all space operations are considered cyber operations, would it make sense to move all of our cyber stuff under the Space Force? Or maybe it would make more sense to build a whole separate 7th branch, the Cyber Force. Although there are only rumors so far for a potential cyber force, as of now, this domain will be shared and utilized similarly but differently across the many military branches, ultimately dictating every service's level of capabilities. I mean, it's obvious why the Space Force needs cyber. I mean, we have all of our satellites that need to be connected to our ground systems that Army used to have owned. We need to guide our missiles. We need to look for vulnerabilities in our satellite networks, as well as just overall mission support. Also, the US Space Force's Cyberspace Effects Operations Officer, yeah, there was a slight name change since the previous Crash Course season, have a huge influence in advising commanders on associated risks and mitigation factors that align with the technologies that are to be utilized in a potential mission, so these cyber nerds are essential in assessing the success rate of a proposed mission concept, of course, being a specialized space mission concept. So, long story short, these cyber guys do stuff in order to keep our space superiority's pulse beating. Alright, I know this video has been focused on cyber, but a primary purpose of this video was to further explain that space operations before the creation of the Space Force had been very divided amongst the different services, and now the goal is for most of them, if not potentially in the future all of them, to be consolidated under one force, the US Space Force. Now, with cyber, something similar could happen. It is important to note that space operations can be considered cyber operations, but they are still different things. I guess it's kind of like not all squares are rectangles type of thing. Anyways, if the DoD adopts the same mindset they have for space, at least in the sense that there won't be a duplication of efforts, now currently attempting to consolidate tons of space stuff from more than 60 different organizations under the US Space Force to be unified and efficient, maybe we'll do the same thing with the 7th branch, the Cyberspace Force. Of course, regardless on how we decide to organize it, cyber operations will be used across every service branch always, arguably most prominent in the US Space Force, but regardless, the cyber force will be a lethal force that is necessary. Of course, if we want to win the great power competition. Now hold on, we're not done yet. You can't talk about cyber without mentioning the electromagnetic spectrum. The cyberspace and electromagnetic spectrum capabilities have been rapidly evolving, and just like the physical space realm, these invisible capabilities are also congesting the operational environment. As all these invisible rays are competing for space with different threat actors, neutral systems like commercial aircraft and airports, as well as cellular infrastructures. I mean, in all honesty, I already see that on a small scale whenever I go to the USAFA gym. I mean, I have my Bluetooth headphones in, and sometimes the connection will just disconnect even though my phone is right here, and I'm pretty sure it's because you got a million other people in there with Bluetooth headphones and their rays traveling all over the place to the point where even from here to here the ray gets a little confused or gets interfered with something else. I don't know. I think that's why. That's like my educated guess after creating the script for this Crash Course episode, so hopefully I'm right. Honestly, I'm not the cyber genius, but what I do know is we have a lot of cyber geniuses on our cyber team, and of course on our AI team too. If you're interested in joining those teams, they'd love to have you, but I will say that on those teams you do have to have a good amount of technical experience, which is really cool that we have the ability as undergraduates to have cadets able to create cyber training exercises, cyber curriculum, and tons of other cyber things like an Astrogate chatbot under development. I need to stop before I completely say the script for the i5 programs video that'll be coming up in a couple of episodes from now, but you'll get to learn a lot more about what we do in i5 space regarding cyber and AI. It's pretty sweet. Also, I am aware that I haven't really hit a lot on offensive cyber capabilities. There are many typical cyberspace threats techniques used, such as malicious code like viruses and worms, social engineering attacks, spyware, denial of service, rootkit, cryptojacking, and others. One of the most common ones that is pretty easy for people not very tech savvy to do is... Oh shoot, I'm gonna click that. But seriously, we are at risk of being hacked all the time. I mean, the Pentagon is literally attempted to be hacked like thousands of times a day. We can always make sure super advanced hacking and jamming techniques are continually robusted and even more advanced over time, but a lot of the time, social engineering can get the job done too. So be careful out there, because each and every one of us is directly at risk for that. And especially as a military member having to hold classified information, make sure you're following the proper safety techniques and security protocol to ensure that our information doesn't get stolen and given to our adversaries for simple neglection of the rules. I remember when I was a kid, I always got really tempted. I would play games on Cool Math Games or sites like that, and it would say free iPhone. At the time, it was probably iPhone 5, free iPhone 4, iPhone 5, spin the wheel type of thing. I'd click on it. They asked for my mom's credit card information, and now both of my parents live under a bridge. I'm just kidding. That was a joke. I never actually clicked on them because thankfully all I did when I grew up was go on computers, so I kind of knew what was fake and what wasn't, but I would still click on it and see what would happen, but never put numbers in. When they ask you for numbers, that's where your 5-year-old, 7-year-old, 9-year-old brain needs to be like, whoa. Now, a little bit more on cyber attacks. Not all cyber attacks actually have to completely shut down or fully degrade a system. For example, maybe a good technique for the US Space Force's cyber officers to do would be to subtly degrade a satellite system to where they are operating slower, but undetectably slower, unless somebody really looked deep into that satellite system. And like everything, we want to make sure that these attacks are necessary to accomplish a legitimate military or law enforcement purpose, as well as specific to what is being targeted. In all honesty, I'm not very qualified to go beyond that, but if you're interested in the defensive and offensive cyber operations on an unclassified level, I highly encourage you to check out our cyber curriculum and our Cyber 100 to 500 course series. They're currently working on it now. They have Cyber 100 and 200 out. If you're a member, you are able to take them, as well as Cyber 010 and 050, which are introductory coding courses that I highly recommend for you, especially if you want to learn more about this cyber realm. And of course, one last plug, watch the AI video crash course series on the i5 Space YouTube channel. You won't be disappointed, and you will learn a lot more about the future implications of military and AI. And in my opinion, I honestly do think we should have a US cyber force. And I do understand there'll be a lot of challenges with that, especially because cyber is across all of our different branches. But from an administrative management standpoint, it may make a lot more sense to have a cyber force ready to go at a moment's notice to accomplish any services cyber problems. But once again, just an opinion. There is still a lot to be covered about the cyber world, and it's up to you to have a foundational understanding of how it works because you utilize it every single day.